Hey everybody, welcome back. I've been doing a bit of a collab here on this Super M project with Senior. Now, last weekend was Father's Day weekend, and I told him, well, instead of buying him a card, which is basically throwing away $3 to $5, I told him, tell you what, full day's worth of labor, whatever you want done. He's like, let's work over this wide front end for the Super M. So that's what I did. Wasn't a lot of time taken for filming. We were just in here working last weekend, but I found some files on the camera that Senior had been recording, so I'll just let him kind of explain what we did here.
Well, Squatch Senior here with an update about what's going on with the Super M project here. For Father's Day, Squatch253 offered me his services for today. Whatever I wanted to do, he says he's going to give me a hand. So I figured this might be a good opportunity to go through this wide front end on this thing. The problem I was having with it is this is a tapered spindle with a keyway, and when you tighten this down, it would bind it up and you couldn't even turn this. So what I had to do is what we did is we took it all apart, cleaned it. Everything is good inside this thing. It's really surprising. But what we did on the steering arm, we took about a 1/16 off on the bottom side. We started with a 1/16 just to make sure that we didn't go too far. And I took it in on the milling machine I just got going. I milled that down. I kind of wiped out a couple cutters until I found the right one. This is some really hard steel here. So anyway, this one here took a 1/16 out, and it works just, you can just feel a little bit bind right there, and then she's free. So anyway, that side, plenty good. I think once we get weight on the tractor and it's not enough bind, it's going to cause any problems, and pretty sure that'll wear in pretty fast. Packed all the wheel bearings, checked all the seals, made new gaskets for the caps. Turned out good. On this side, we did the 1/16, the same as the other side. This is the second one we did. Anyway, this one was a little bit loose, and we had to put a shim in here, which I just soon like that shim. If things happen where it doesn't tighten down and stuff, we can take the shim out. It'll come down a little bit more in the taper and tighten us up where we need. So really happy the way this turned out, and that was really lucky I had the opportunity to get some help on this.
Now quickly, the only thing that wasn't really explained in there was the reason why I believe the tapered and keyed fit of these upper arms onto the spindles was so loose. When I got into here, I found brand new looking Timken thrust bearings down here, which I believe were replaced and are a bit fatter than what the IH originals are. That caused the whole vertical spindle shaft to sit a little bit lower in this housing, and then this upper arm would contact the top of the housing tube before that tapered fit would tighten up. Fortunately, I don't think a lot of time was put on, a lot of operating hours was put on this because, well, in addition to this being extremely hard, we didn't detect any keyway wear, any spline wear. So, like Senior said, he milled down these arms, made them just a bit thinner so that they didn't contact the tube. The spline fit, the tapered fit tightened up perfectly, and everything is good to go now. Like he said, we did wheel bearings and seals and everything else, and I also, with a little bit of heat, took a dent out of this bearing cap that had been making my eyelid twitch ever since he brought this home. So front end should be good. Today now, I'm looking at this front steering bolster just a little bit, and so far the thing looks pretty good. I just got one bolt left in the cover here. Okay, trying to do this one-handed. Honestly, it's not looking too bad. This quadrant is nice and tight up there yet. We've even got a cotter pin through the nut, which is a good thing to see. And turning on it, I know the glare from the sun is making things a little difficult here, but there is no play in that thing at all, and it is nice and smooth. These wide fronts usually don't take quite the abuse that a narrow front does because you don't have the full weight of the tractor bearing up on that shaft. But what I think I might do is remove this sector from the top of the shaft, take that thing all out the bottom. We'll just have a look at the bushings, which I suspect are good, and probably do a reseal on this and some fresh grease. Call it good. Pin. There's the nut. Looks like we've got washer under there too. Stuck in the grease. See if I can get the screwdriver under it. Washer, been a little bit dished. We might have to do something about that. All right, got the quadrant knocked loose on the shaft. Good thing those splines are still tight. Now before I pull the quadrant off of the shaft, I always index mark these. You're probably not going to see it on camera from here, but there's I put a T right there and a T right there. Line up those marks next time and you'll have everything in time on the splines. So, oh, yep, there we had a washer. Threw it in the dirt. Always a solid plan. That's the first thing you want to do. So they did have a bit of a thrust back there. And honestly, these teeth look pretty good on the quadrant. So splines are obviously good. They were all tight yet. Just slide the shaft down now. I can see I'm going to have to take care of some of this old dried grease. It's not going to fit through there without having to force it. That's cleaned up somewhat. There. For the most part, we're all apart. So I'm going to clean all this stuff up, report back.
You know, another problem I've had on this Super M is on the bell housing. As you remember in the past, these two ears were broken off inside here. They'd been raised up. Makes me a little nervous using this way. So Squatch 253, he has been out doing a little shopping here. I've been sticking pretty close to home during this COVID stuff. And, you know, to me it's the seniors are going to run into the problem more than the younger generation. So I stick pretty close to home. He does all the running, and I'll go show you what he found. Okay, here's what he come home with. As you can see, the ears inside are really good yet. Still got a piece of the throttle bearing carrier in there where they broke that off, but went through this casting. She really rusty, been laying in the ground for quite a while and stuff, but from what I can see, no damage to it. Should be able to clean it up. And the thing is, with the Super M project, it has a 3-bolt starter. This is what they call a Gen 2. A lot of the M's had just a 2-bolt starter. This is 3. These housings are really tough to find, so when you find one, you better grab it, and the price was very reasonable from what I've been pricing these things besides. We'll get this thing cleaned up. We'll probably get the inside cleaned up. We'll do a Gliptol coating on the inside and primer the outside and give her a paint job. So that one more piece solved. That just makes a little more work of the project. Hey, here's another issue that I've had with this Super M. This is original flywheel. I'll see if I can get a light on, see if we can, the glare is kind of bad there, maybe we can pick it out. But you can see how this thing is cracked. The guy that grounded for me, he's pretty reputable shop, Lakehead Clutch and Brake. He said this shouldn't really be a problem, but these cracks look pretty heavy to me. It makes me a little nervous. So anyway, he come home with this one. It does need to be ground. You can see that she's a little bit wavy inside and stuff. Also going to need a new ring gear, but we'll get that cleaned up. We'll buff it down, get her into the shop, get her ground, and just see if this should be serviceable. So I think this one should work out good too. A few more items he picked up. This here is the clutch shaft here. This is what the disc rides on, and this must have had a pretty tough life in the past. This thing has been wore down, re-sleeved, and wore down again. So figured see if we can find a new shaft. I could probably turn out a new sleeve for that. Anyway, he rounded up this one. Another, again, pretty rusty. Don't look like any wear on the, splines or anything. So we'll get this cleaned up. We'll see how that bearing fits on the end. And hopefully this is a serviceable unit. And another thing, the input for the drive shaft into the transmission. Another problem I had, this was a pretty loose fit in there. It kind of wobbled around. The seal area is all wore out. We could speedy sleeve that to get by if we wanted to. But he got another one. For what I can see, it's looking pretty good on the sleeve area, or for the seal. And doesn't really look wore at all. So this one will just come out of the tractor. It should be easy to clean up, and we'll get that put on. And also, I did need the new flywheel nut. As you remember, this one was kind of galled onto the crankshaft. And you can look inside there. You could, I don't know if I can see down here, but there was a couple scuff marks on the crankshaft. They'd beat this on the past. You can see the hammer and chisel marks, everything like that. And what I had to do, if you remember in the past video, I drilled it, split it, and it come right off. So anyway, had a really nice nut here, no chisel marks or anything, and we'll get that cleaned up, get her on the front pulley, and that should be good to go. One of the next things I'll be doing with this thing is getting the head put on. I got everything done up pretty good on this. Valve, all brand new valves, springs, everything. I've had it into the machine shop. They've had it checked it over for me. Said it should be a good serviceable head. These M heads and H's too, kind of notorious for cracking. We've had some pinned and stuff and been working out real good stuff. So hopefully that head works out for us. I also got the rocker shaft that I got to go through yet. As you can see, the rockers, you can see on the end here where it's wore, you know, with the new valves and stuff. I'm going to put this on the valve grinder. We'll probably be dressing that up, get her rounded out so that rides real smooth right on top of the valve stem. So anyway, that's another one to go through. We'll check out the bushings here, see how loose we are, get everything cleaned up real good, make sure all the oil passages, the tube is clean. A lot of sediment can come in these tubes here. So anyway, that's one of the next projects to do. And I did have some studs out of the head, got all them put back in. And when you guys get into heads, verify the length of these studs first, because on this here, there is two longer ones by about 1/4 of an inch right here. And what that does is this bracket for the throttle pivot shaft goes on. And you have to have the extra length for the bracket so you get a full nut on the stud. Anyway, that's the next thing. We'll get everything should be cleaned up, ready to go. Got gaskets, everything, and that's probably going to be the next project here. So we'll get the head on, we'll get this cleaned up. Got the tappets all cleaned up, got the push rods cleaned up and stuff. So that should kind of give you a little bit of an update what's been going on around here and what's coming up on a future video. Thanks for watching.
All right, so I cleaned the bolster again, and things aren't horrible in here. This bushing at the base for the pedestal shaft is really in pretty good condition, as are the bushings here for the steering worm shaft and this bushing up here at the top of the vertical pedestal shaft. So nothing is really going to have to be done there, and corresponding areas on said pedestal shaft are actually not too bad. And I cleaned up the steering worm just to check that clearance. That's good as well. The thrust bearing on top of the pedestal shaft is good. I did cut a new felt seal to go in this retainer. This retainer goes down over the top of that shaft, sets on top of this bearing, and seals the top of the bolster from dust getting in there. You can see the old seal was a bit expired. But one thing I did notice with this bushing, I don't know if it's been replaced at one time, but this hole right here that has that spiral grease groove for distributing it around the bushing should be clocked about at the 12 o'clock position to line up with this grease fitting and the grease passage to lube all of that. I don't see any evidence that this has spun it's positioned well and it doesn't look worn. There was no excessive slack. I think somebody put this in with the grease hole in the wrong spot, and I checked, there are no reliefs cut on the backside to channel grease around. Some bushings are like that. This one's pretty much too thin to even have that happen. So what I did was I took the old Zerk fitting out of here and I just drilled a new hole to allow grease to come into that bushing. I deburred the edges, and up in there you can see it looks kind of ugly, but I milled a little bit of a crossover passage to intersect with the spiraled grease distribution groove that was already in there. It's not pretty, but it's very functional. So I tell you, all in all, I haven't been too impressed with the work that was done on this whole front system, between everything we found with that axle over there and now this. Whoever was in this the last time, well, I'm not saying you need to be as picky as I am, but you know, do it right. If you don't line that grease hole up with your grease passage, all this runs dry. You can see there's a little bit of discoloration here. It's a miracle that this thing hadn't hogged itself out on that steering shaft. Like I said before, I think being a wide front end really helped this out. Bolster up right now. I'll show you these grease seals. One of them goes up in here at the lower end of this bushing right here, and the other one goes right here where that worm steering shaft goes in. I was able to cross these numbers. I have 2 new seals on order, so we're not going to be able to completely finish this today, but we have that problem addressed. Now, another thing I found when I was in here, talked to Senior, and he was wondering if it wasn't going to be too much trouble if I could free up this claw that can go in and engage with the front of the engine to manually turn it over by this shaft that runs out the front. Now, this was seized about right here, I would say. They usually stick in the bolster piece right here, and there's some more parts and pieces in here that, well, I got in here and nothing was even close to being right. So see if I can assemble this stuff for you real quick. There and there. Okay, so this spring and this sleeve ride on the inside of the bolster here. This sticks out the front. Now, there's supposed to be a cross pin that goes through this hole under the sleeve. It gets held in and retained by the sleeve, and that cross pin is what joins the claw to this eye that's on the end of this shaft that sticks out the front. That's how you turn on the shaft, and then the claw turns in here. Well, that pin was gone, so there was nothing joining the shaft to the claw. And there's also supposed to be a snap ring in this groove that holds this sleeve and everything together. Snap ring was MIA, so rust was basically all that was holding these pieces in there. So not a huge deal. The job just gets, yet again, a little bit bigger than I thought it was going to be. But I had a bunch of this round stock, 1/2 inch diameter, sitting in the corner, and I just chopped off a 2-inch long piece of that. That will fit perfectly. I can do this one-handed. Come on, Squatch. Here, we'll get gravity to work for us here. There we go. That fits perfectly through that sleeve, or sorry, through the claw. Then the sleeve will retain that in. You can see it can't fall out. And for a snap ring, that is a 2-inch ID snap ring. Just happened to have one in one of my parts bins. So we should have everything here to assemble this and have that part all working too. Just like that. Good spring action on there. Turns well. I put a new Zerk fitting down there, cleaned all the old nasty grease out of the passage. And if I spin this around right there, you can see how the collar and the snap ring and everything is holding the cross pin in. So, Senior has a functioning manual hand crank claw on the front of his bolster. But seeing as how we're waiting on those seals for this part, there's not a lot else I can do with this the way it is right now, so we go find something else. There. Always better to get that stuff off. So the bell housing I picked up, as Senior showed you guys earlier, I went ahead and stripped all of the old bolts out of it, the broken pieces from the old release bearing tube that were in there. Got that old serial number tag off. It was too corroded to even see what it was. All the tacks came out just fine, so we can swap the proper serial number plate over off of Senior's. And I've given everything a pretty good once over with the grinders and the wire wheels, and don't really see anything here that scares me. Interesting area up here. At first I thought I uncovered an old weld like from a crack, but when you look at it, it only goes in probably a 1/16 of an inch maybe, and it's the same down here too. It's almost like they corrected maybe a casting flaw in there or some kind of a gouge that got put in there at the factory. I doubt that's anything that was done after the fact. It's just too clean and there's no evidence of cracks, so that doesn't worry me. I got everything on the inside as well as I could. Getting kind of dark in here, I know, but dirty, horrible job. You can see from what accumulated on the tailgate of poor old Blue here, this is quite nasty. So there's a lot of bolt holes that still need to be cleaned, but there are no broken bolts in this thing. Everything looks good. Threaded holes all look good. But I think I'm going to end up sandblasting this too. I got the big chunks off with the grinders. I believe we have a workable casting here that's got much better ears on it than those funny looking brazed up ones that are on Seniors. So I think we're going to probably cut the video right here between what he got done and what I got done and everything else. I got to get this thing. We got to at least do some Gliptol coating on the inside, and we're going to have to paint this, match the engine. Did you know that paint is just the word pain with an extra T on the end? It's true. Thanks for watching, guys.